The Judge Judy courtroom fell dead silent as America's toughest judge leaned back in her chair, a cold smile spreading across her face. What she was about to say would cost one entitled millionaire everything she had ever worked for, destroy her reputation forever, and turn her into the most hated woman in America. The 81-year-old television icon had just heard something so outrageous, so unbelievably entitled, that even she was momentarily speechless. But when Judge Judy Files found her voice again, the words that came out would become the most savage judicial destruction ever caught on camera, viewed by over 50 million people, and replayed endlessly across every social media platform on Earth. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Victoria Wellington Morrison, a 47-year-old real estate heiress worth an estimated $80 million, had strutted into that courtroom wearing a $15,000 Chanel suit and a smirk that said she owned the world. The Beverly Hills socialite had bulldozed through life with the same strategy for decades. Flash money, name-drop connections, and remind everyone that rules are for poor people. She'd bought her way out of DUI charges, silenced sexual harassment victims with NDAs, and crushed small businesses with armies of expensive lawyers. Victoria had never met a problem that couldn't be solved with a big enough check or the right phone call to the right politician. But she had just made the biggest mistake of her privileged life. Victoria had looked Judge Judy straight in the eye and said something so shocking, so breathtakingly arrogant, that it would end her reign of terror forever. The words had barely left her lips when Judge Judy's expression changed from professional irritation to pure fury. This wasn't some bought-and-paid-for judge in Beverly Hills Municipal Court. This wasn't a charity board meeting where Victoria's donations bought her immunity. This was Judge Judy's courtroom, where money means nothing, and entitled attitudes get you destroyed, in front of millions of viewers. The case that brought Victoria to this moment of reckoning started 6 months earlier when she decided that traffic laws didn't apply to people who drive $250,000 cars. Racing through a school zone at 85 miles per hour in her brand-new Bentley, Victoria had slammed into Maria Gonzalez, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher walking to her car after staying late to tutor struggling students. The impact shattered Maria's pelvis, ended her teaching career, and left her facing hundreds of thousands in medical bills that her basic teacher's insurance wouldn't cover. Any normal person would have been horrified, apologetic, and immediately reached out to help the victim. But Victoria Wellington Morrison wasn't normal people. Within hours of the accident, her team of lawyers had descended on the scene like vultures, intimidating witnesses, bribing tow truck drivers to hide evidence, and pressuring Maria to sign a settlement agreement that would have given her barely enough money to cover her first surgery. When Maria refused and decided to sue for proper compensation, Victoria declared war. Victoria had walked into Judge Judy's courtroom that day expecting another easy victory. She'd hired the most expensive law firm in Los Angeles, prepared a defense strategy based on victim blaming and character assassination, and planned to crush Maria Gonzalez the same way she'd crushed hundreds of other little people who had dared to challenge her. The entitled heiress had even boasted to her country club friends that she would make Judge Judy look like a fool on national television and turn the whole thing into free publicity for her real estate empire. Before we dive into the complete destruction that's about to unfold, the moment that will leave you absolutely speechless and show you exactly what happens when unstoppable entitlement meets immovable justice. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of these jaw-dropping moments when karma finally catches up to people who think they're above the law. Trust me, what Judge Judy is about to do to this entitled millionaire will be the most satisfying thing you see all year, and the ending will shock you to your core. What Victoria didn't know was that Judge Judy had spent the entire previous night reviewing every detail of this case. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, and every dirty trick Victoria's lawyers had tried to pull. The legendary judge had seen entitled rich people try to buy their way out of consequences before, but something about this case had triggered a level of fury that even her closest staff had never witnessed. Judge Judy was about to deliver justice so swift and so brutal that it would become the gold standard for how to handle entitled people who think money makes them untouchable. Judge Judy Files represents everything that entitled millionaires like Victoria Wellington Morrison fear most. Absolute authority that cannot be bought, intimidated, or manipulated. At 81 years old, this Brooklyn-born powerhouse has built her legendary reputation on one unshakable principle that has terrified wealthy defendants for over 4 decades. Money doesn't buy justice in her courtroom, and entitled attitudes get you annihilated on national television. What makes Judge Judy particularly dangerous to people like Victoria isn't just her razor-sharp legal mind or her decades of experience demolishing liars and manipulators. It's her supernatural ability to see through expensive clothes, fancy lawyers, and crocodile tears to expose the rotten character underneath. Born Judith Susan Blum in Brooklyn, New York, Judge Judy clawed her way up from a working-class family to become one of the most feared judges in America, through pure grit and an absolute refusal to tolerate nonsense from anyone, regardless of their bank account. Her father was a dentist, her mother a homemaker, and neither parent ever let young Judy forget that respect is earned through character, not inherited through wealth. This blue-collar Brooklyn upbringing forged a steel backbone that would later make her immune to the tears, threats, and checkbooks that entitled people use to escape consequences. After graduating from New York Law School, Judge Judy spent 25 years in New York's family court system, where she developed her legendary reputation for cutting through lies and manipulation with surgical precision. Family court is where Judge Judy learned to recognize every trick in the entitled person's playbook. The wealthy parents who blamed teachers for their spoiled children's behavior, the trust fund kids who thought money could buy them out of assault charges, the socialite mothers who hired armies of lawyers to avoid taking responsibility for their neglect. Judge Judy had seen it all, demolished it all, and developed an almost psychic ability to predict exactly what entitled people would say before they opened their mouths. What truly makes Judge Judy a nightmare for people like Victoria is her complete immunity to the weapons that entitled people typically use to control situations. Expensive lawyers who try to intimidate her get shut down with a single glance. Designer clothes and jewelry that usually signal "don't mess with me" actually make Judge Judy more suspicious, not less. Tears that normally melt judges' hearts get dismissed as performance art. Name-dropping that typically opens doors gets you thrown out faster. Judge Judy had spent decades watching entitled people use these exact same tactics to escape justice, and she had developed specific countermeasures for every single one. Yet the television show that made Judge Judy a household name became her ultimate weapon against entitled behavior, because it added the one thing that terrifies wealthy people more than jail time: public humiliation broadcast to millions of viewers. In her courtroom, there's nowhere to hide, no settlement agreements to silence victims, no expensive PR firms to spin the story. When Judge Judy destroys an entitled defendant, the whole world watches, records it, and replays it forever. She had turned accountability into entertainment, and entitled people like Victoria had become her favorite targets. Judge Judy's signature approach to handling entitled defendants has become the stuff of legend among legal professionals and victims of wealthy bullies alike. She doesn't gradually build to her point or politely suggest that someone might be wrong. When she spots entitlement, she strikes like a cobra, using the defendant's own arrogance against them with devastating efficiency. Her questioning style is designed specifically to make entitled people reveal their true character on camera. She asks simple questions that entitled people can't help but answer honestly, because they genuinely believe their behavior is justified. Fellow judges describe Judge Judy as having an almost supernatural ability to read people's character within the first 30 seconds of meeting them. Court staff who have worked with her for decades say she can spot a liar, a manipulator, or an entitled person before they finish their first sentence. This gift, combined with her encyclopedic knowledge of the law and her complete fearlessness in confronting powerful people, makes her the ultimate nightmare for anyone who thinks money can buy them immunity from consequences. What Judge Judy was about to do to Victoria Wellington Morrison wouldn't just be another case or another television episode. Legal experts who witnessed the confrontation would later describe it as a masterclass in judicial authority, a perfect example of how the law is supposed to work when it's not corrupted by wealth and influence. The entitled heiress had picked a fight with someone who had spent over 40 years preparing for exactly this moment, someone who had made a career out of destroying people who think rules don't apply to them. Victoria was about to learn that Judge Judy doesn't just rule against entitled defendants. She systematically dismantles their entire worldview, exposes their character to millions of viewers, and ensures that their humiliation becomes permanent internet history. The legendary judge was locked, loaded, and ready to deliver the kind of justice that entitled millionaires have nightmares about. Victoria Wellington Morrison embodies everything toxic about inherited wealth and unchecked privilege. The 47-year-old Beverly Hills socialite represents the worst kind of entitled person, someone who genuinely believes that money makes her a superior human being, and that consequences are for poor people. Born into old California real estate money, Victoria had never worked a real day in her life, never faced actual consequences for her actions, and never met a problem that couldn't be solved by writing a big enough check or making the right phone call to her family's political connections. Her rise through Beverly Hills. Society tells you everything about how wealth can corrupt character when there's no accountability. Victoria had inherited a $200 million real estate empire at age 25, and instead of using that privilege responsibly, she had spent the next 2 decades terrorizing anyone who dared cross her path. She destroyed small businesses that competed with her properties by bribing city inspectors to find violations. She'd silenced sexual harassment victims at her companies with massive settlement payments and ironclad NDAs. She'd even had a homeless shelter shut down because she didn't want those people lowering her property values. Victoria's signature move was using her wealth as a weapon to crush anyone who challenged her authority. When a restaurant server had asked her to put out her cigarette in a non-smoking establishment, Victoria had called the owner and threatened to buy the building and evict them unless the server was fired immediately. When a teacher had given her spoiled daughter a failing grade, Victoria had donated $500,000 to the school district with strings attached that resulted in the teacher's termination. When a valet had taken too long to bring her car, Victoria had called her lawyer and sued the hotel for intentional infliction of emotional distress, settling for $50,000 just to prove a point. But Victoria had a fatal character flaw that Judge Judy was about to exploit with devastating precision. She genuinely believed that her money made her smarter, better, and more important than everyone else around her. This wasn't just garden-variety entitlement or temporary arrogance. Victoria had spent so many years using wealth to avoid consequences that she had lost all connection to reality. In her twisted worldview, poor people deserved whatever happened to them because they had obviously made bad life choices. Rich people like her deserved special treatment because they were clearly superior human beings who contributed more to society. This delusional belief system had made Victoria sloppy and overconfident. She'd stopped being careful about covering her tracks because she'd never faced real consequences. She'd stopped hiring competent lawyers because she'd never lost a case that mattered. She'd stopped preparing for legal battles because money had always been enough to win. It was like watching someone who'd never faced a real opponent suddenly step into the ring with a heavyweight champion. Victoria's preparation for Judge Judy revealed everything wrong with her approach to life. Instead of researching the case law, studying the evidence, or preparing honest answers, she'd focused on her outfit, her makeup, and her media strategy. She'd actually hired a publicist to help her manage the narrative and turn her appearance into positive publicity for her real estate business. Victoria had walked into Judge Judy's courtroom expecting a performance opportunity, not a legal proceeding where facts and character actually mattered. The case that would destroy Victoria's entire world started with Maria Gonzalez, a soft-spoken elementary school teacher who had dedicated her life to helping underprivileged children learn to read. Maria had been walking to her beat-up Honda Civic after staying late to tutor struggling students when Victoria's $250,000 Bentley slammed into her at 85 miles per hour in a 25-mile school zone. The impact shattered Maria's pelvis in 7 places, destroyed her left leg, and ended her teaching career forever. While Maria lay unconscious in the ICU fighting for her life, Victoria was already on the phone with her lawyers, planning her defense strategy. Within 24 hours, Victoria's legal team had descended on the accident scene like vultures. They intimidated witnesses, bribed the tow truck driver to hide dashcam footage, and pressured the hospital to limit Maria's visitors. When Maria finally woke up 3 days later, Victoria's lawyers were waiting with a settlement offer, $25,000 in exchange for signing away all her rights to sue. For a woman facing $500,000 in medical bills and a destroyed career, it was insulting beyond belief. When Maria refused and decided to fight back, Victoria declared total war. She hired private investigators to dig up dirt on Maria's family. She had her lawyers file frivolous motions to drain Maria's legal fund. She even tried to get Maria evicted from her apartment by buying the building and claiming she needed it for redevelopment. But Maria Gonzalez wasn't backing down. The teacher who had spent years fighting for her students was now fighting for justice, and she was about to get help from the most powerful ally possible. Judge Judy had spent the entire night before the hearing, reviewing every piece of evidence, every witness statement, and every dirty trick Victoria's team had attempted. The legendary judge had prosecuted hit-and-run cases before, but something about Victoria's complete lack of remorse and systematic victim intimidation had triggered a level of fury that even her closest staff had never witnessed. Victoria was about to face justice. The moment that destroyed Victoria's entire world started when Judge Judy asked a simple question. "Ms. Morrison, do you feel any responsibility for what happened to Maria Gonzalez?" Victoria's response would become the most infamous answer in television history. Looking directly into the camera with a smirk that radiated pure entitlement, Victoria replied, "Your Honor, people like her should be grateful that people like me even share the same roads. I pay more in taxes than she makes in a lifetime." The courtroom fell dead silent. Judge Judy's face went from professional irritation to pure fury in less than 2 seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely lethal. "People like her?" Judge Judy repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air like a death sentence. "Ms. Morrison, people like Maria Gonzalez dedicate their lives to educating children. People like you apparently think human beings are disposable if they don't have enough money." What happened next was judicial destruction at its finest. Judge Judy leaned forward, locked eyes with Victoria, and delivered the line that would end her reign of terror forever. "Your arrogance is only exceeded by your stupidity. I'm awarding Maria Gonzalez every penny she asked for plus punitive damages. You just bought yourself a $4 million lesson in human decency." Victoria's face went white as the devastating reality hit her. She hadn't just lost the case. She'd destroyed herself on national television with her own words. Within minutes of Judge Judy's devastating verdict, Victoria Wellington. Morrison's privileged world began crumbling faster than anyone could have imagined. The clip of her saying people like her should be grateful that people like me even share the same roads went viral before the show even finished airing. Social media exploded with a fury that turned Victoria into the most hated woman in America overnight. The hashtag Victoria Karen began trending worldwide within hours, generating over 2 million posts in the first 24 hours alone. The immediate social media destruction was just the beginning of Victoria's nightmare. Legal experts who had watched the case began calling it the most satisfying example of karmic justice ever caught on camera. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz tweeted, "In 50 years of practicing law, I've never seen someone destroy their own case so completely with pure arrogance. Judge Judy just delivered a masterclass in justice." The American Bar Association's official account posted a breakdown of why Victoria's statement was not just morally reprehensible but legally catastrophic, noting that her words would be used in law schools for decades as an example of how entitled defendants destroy themselves. But the real devastation came when Victoria's wealthy social circle turned on her with vicious efficiency. The Bel Air Country Club revoked her membership within 48 hours, citing damage to their reputation. The Beverly Hills Women's Charity League, where Victoria had served as president, held an emergency vote and expelled her unanimously. Even her closest friends began publicly distancing themselves, with socialite Margaret Whitmore telling Entertainment Tonight, "Victoria's comments were absolutely disgusting. None of us knew she felt that way about working people." The financial consequences hit Victoria like a tsunami. Major tenants began breaking leases at her commercial properties, citing reputational damage. Her real estate development deals started falling apart as investors pulled out to avoid association with her toxic brand. The Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce removed her from their board of directors. Even her own family's real estate empire distanced itself, with her father issuing a public statement saying Victoria's views do not reflect our family's values. Victoria's attempt at damage control only made things worse. Her publicist quit after Victoria refused to issue a genuine apology, insisting that people were misunderstanding her comments. Her lawyers abandoned her when she demanded they appeal Judge Judy's verdict, calling it career suicide to be associated with her case. Within 2 weeks, Victoria had become radioactive in Beverly Hills society, transforming from influential socialite to social pariah in the most spectacular fall from grace anyone could remember. The complete destruction of Victoria Wellington Morrison became more than just a single court case. It became a cultural phenomenon that demonstrated exactly what happens when decades of unchecked privilege finally meet immovable justice. 6 months after Judge Judy's devastating verdict, Victoria's $80 million empire had shrunk to barely $15 million. Her social standing had evaporated completely, and her name had become synonymous with entitled arrogance across the entire internet. Legal scholars began using her case as the perfect example of how wealth without character inevitably leads to spectacular downfall. The ripple effects of Victoria's humiliation spread far beyond her personal destruction. Other entitled wealthy people suddenly became much more careful about their public behavior, knowing that Victoria's fate could easily become their own. Judge Judy's brutal takedown became required viewing in business ethics classes, diversity training seminars, and even high school civics courses. The phrase "people like her should be grateful" entered the cultural lexicon as shorthand for the kind of toxic elitism that Americans despise. Maria Gonzalez, meanwhile, used her $4 million settlement to establish a foundation providing educational support for underprivileged children. She returned to teaching part-time despite her injuries, and became a national symbol of dignity triumphing over entitlement. When asked about Victoria during a recent interview, Maria simply said, "I hope she learned something about treating people with basic human respect. That's a lesson money can't buy." Judge Judy's destruction of Victoria Wellington Morrison will be remembered as one of television's greatest moments of justice. It proved that no amount of money, no level of privilege, and no degree of entitlement can protect you from the consequences of your character. Victoria thought she could buy her way out of responsibility for destroying an innocent teacher's life. Instead, she bought herself a permanent place in internet infamy as the ultimate example of what happens when karma finally catches up. The legendary judge didn't just rule against Victoria that day. She delivered a message that resonated with millions of Americans who are tired of watching wealthy people escape consequences for their actions. In Judge Judy's courtroom, character matters more than cash, decency trumps dollars, and entitled attitudes get you destroyed in front of the entire world. If you found this complete annihilation of the most entitled Karen in television history as satisfying as we did, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more moments when justice destroys people who think rules don't apply to them. The comments are exploding with reactions to Victoria's epic downfall. Drop yours below and let us know what you think about Judge Judy's brutal justice. Who do you think will be the next entitled millionaire to learn that money can't buy you immunity from the consequences of being a terrible human being?